Hey everyone, and welcome to the first video I've put out in a little while. Sorry that it's been like a week-ish, maybe a little bit more at this point since the last tiny little update video, but I've been pretty busy with some real life stuff, and I'm still sort of taking a break from the race, so I haven't really been playing very much. But I did want to make this video. This is basically just going to be my thoughts on Illium as a class. Spoiler alert, um, get your jokes out now, but I have already quit Illium, so my thoughts are not exactly great, but there's some good points and there's some not so good points, and I'm going to try and cover everything. This is not going to be like a comprehensive, tutorial or anything. I'm just going to go over the basics of how Illium works and then talk about my thoughts on the class and why I ended up quitting so soon. And then, as for what happens next, there's going to be another update video sometime in the near future where I go over that. But this video is just going to focus on Illium, so let's go ahead and get started. First things first, how does Illium work? So, most of Illium's skills revolve around this thing right here, this little orb. This is known as the crystal, and it's a second job skill that you can put on a key, and basically you control where it is by pressing the key. So when you press the key, it shoots out to a set distance in front of you. This is the distance. It'll always move this far in front of you when you press the key. If you hold the down arrow while you press the key, like so, then it will appear on top of you, and then if you press it again, it will move back out. You cannot move the crystal to like a very close position to where it previously was, so if I like move a few steps forward like this, and I press the key, it tells me that the crystal is too close. It gives you like a little text blurb. But if you go far enough, should be right here, yeah, you can move it forward again. So moving the crystal around is very key to playing Illium, whether you're mobbing or bossing. And then basically what you want to be doing, and there's a couple different ways to do this. There's two main attacks that you want to be using. Okay, that was very laggy. So the two main attacks are Radiant Orb and Radiant Javelin. They have 5th job versions, or sorry, not 5th job, 4th job versions that upgrade them slightly. Basically, you want to use Radiant Orb, and then right after it, you want to use Radiant Javelin, and then right after it, you want to use Radiant Orb, and then, just repeat that. And you want to be aiming those attacks at the crystal, because every time they hit the crystal, they do a reaction skill, which is like an area of effect thing. It has a tiny cooldown on it, so it can't activate frequently, but it's pretty strong when it does. So you always want to make sure you're hitting the crystal with those skills. Now, the unique thing about these skills is that they can animation cancel each other. So what you want to do is basically alternate orb and javelin as fast as you can, and there's a few different ways to do that. Probably the easiest way for most people would be to use sticky keys on your keyboard. If you have no experience using sticky keys to play MapleStory, there's a few classes that benefit from it. I think mostly Nightwalker, to be honest. But basically, the way it works is you turn on sticky keys, and there's some extra settings you have to go through. I don't quite remember them, but there's guides out there that you can find. I think there was one posted on Reddit pretty soon after Illium release. So this is not like secret knowledge. This is pretty well known. But basically, once you have sticky keys on, you want one of the skills to be on a modifier key. Modifier keys are Shift, Control, and Alt. So any of these will work. You want either Javelin or Orb to be on one of these three. Doesn't matter which. I chose to put Orb on there. And then you want the other one to be on a normal key, so like a letter key or your space bar, whatever. And then I don't think I changed anything, but sure. Save my skills, I guess. Anyways, so once you have that set up and you have sticky keys on, if you just hold down both of those keys at the same time, you will do like very fast alternating attacks. The other way to do it, which is the way that I'm going to do it in this video because I don't like messing with sticky keys too often, is just spamming the keys as fast as you can. You can probably hear my keyboard a little bit. I usually try to sit further away so it doesn't pick up, but just for effect, you can hear how fast I'm spamming this. And you just want to hammer away at it basically if you do this. Or you can do the sticky keys and you only have to hold it. So it's easier on your fingers that way. Attack speed does affect this, so it is ideal to get an attack speed in her ability. Use decent speed infusion, use green MPE potion. I don't actually have green MPE potions on this character right now, but you get the idea. You just want to go very, very, very fast. And then, as you can see while I'm doing this, there's like explosions coming out of the crystal. That's basically when the orb hits it, it does the yellow explosion. When the javelin hits it, it does the green and blue explosion, like that. So yeah, that's basically how Illium works. And then as you're attacking with those skills, up here you can see I have an icon for the crystal. Every time you hit the crystal with those skills, it gains charge. And then once you have a certain amount of charge, you can use these other skills. First, you can use Vortex of Light when you have 30 charge. You can use Resonance when you have 60 charge. You can summon Deus when you have 90 charge. And you can use Wings of Glory when you have 150 charge. So, Vortex Swing, just press the key, it does a big like circle attack, it's pretty strong. Each of these skills can only be used once per cycle, more or less. Once you reach 150 charge on this, you have a temporary, like 10-second flashing screen thing, which is when you are allowed to use Wings of Glory, and then after that, your charge resets back to 0, and you start another cycle. So you can only use these once per cycle, and then your crystal resets, and then you can charge it up again and use them again. You get the idea. Resonance is just a buff. You gain Bless Marks, and anything between you will get Bless Marks or Curse Marks, depending on, you know, if it's a party member or if it's a mob. I'll talk more about those later. Deus, you just summon him. He combines your other two summons to form this guy. It's pretty strong. You want this guy out as much as possible when you're bossing. For mobbing, I think the other two are probably better to just have individually, but I'm not exactly sure. That's just how I chose to mob most of the time. So I'll get to 150 here just to use Wings of Glory. So we're spamming, we're spamming, we're spamming, we're spamming. Alright, now we use Wings of Glory. And when we're in Wings of Glory, we can use an enhanced javelin that does more damage, and when it hits stuff, it like explodes into more tiny little missiles than the normal javelin does. There is no crystal when you're in this state, but things nearby will automatically gain curse marks, so you don't have to worry about maintaining them. And then when you end that, the crystal is right back here. And then your normal robots respawn after Deus expires. So that's basically how it goes. You just want to be spamming or using sticky keys to attack as fast as possible by alternating those two skills, and then whenever you have enough charge, you use these skills. I don't know if Glory Wings is actually good for bossing or not. I haven't done enough testing with it. So there's that. It seems like it might be, but honestly I don't know. But yeah, that's the basics. You also have Longinus Spear, which every 15 seconds you can throw it at the crystal, and it does a decent amount of damage. So there's that. Whenever you hit things with Reaction Domination, so this happens when you hit the crystal with Radiant Orb, which is this skill. Whenever something gets hit by this, it gets a curse mark, which, actually let's go to the 4th job version. I'm calling them curse marks, but they're actually umbral brands in GMS, but I'm just going to keep calling them curse marks. So you can stack up to 5 of these on a mob. If you go too long without stacking one, it'll just lose all of its curse marks, and then depending on the number of curse marks you have on the enemy, you deal like a final attack, sort of, that does damage based on the damage of the skill that procced it. And then you also get ignore defense on the mob as well. So that's pretty much everything as far as general bossing. I'm going to cover 5th job just a little bit. I've gotten rid of some of my nodes already because I no longer play the class, obviously, but I kept all my enhancement nodes and the 2 main 5th job skills and speed infusion. So Crystal Ignition is a sort of like hurricane style attack. You can move around while you use it, and if it hits the crystal, it does its own unique reaction skill, which is called what is it? Spectrum? I don't know. Something like that. When you hit the crystal with it, it basically like shoots out beams of light in all 3 directions like this. And then Templar Knight, he's a summon. He will always attack the direction that you are relative to him, if that makes sense. So like if he's where I'm standing and I'm over here, he will attack this way. If he's where I'm standing and I'm over here, he will attack this way. He does a decent amount of damage, but if you gain a certain number of charges on your crystal while he's charging up his attacks, he will double his damage. So he actually is quite strong. Both of those skills have a 3-minute cooldown, but they're a lot of damage. So I'll just go ahead and show them now. So we have... This is Crystal Ignition, and then as you can see, the 3 beams of light, that's the reaction skill. It happens once every second. Does its own decent amount of damage. Looks pretty cool. And we have Templar Knight. Summon him right here. So he'll attack this direction, and then if I charge enough, he will double his damage. I think he does about 10 attacks per summon. It's like 1 attack every 3 seconds. Pretty cool animation. So, what's next? I think we've covered pretty much the basics. Illium also has some iframe skills. It has Longinus Zone. When you use this skill, looks like this, you're invincible during it, which is pretty nice. When you use this skill, you gain invincibility for a duration equal to how many bless marks you have. I did not talk about bless marks. Every time you use Radiant Orb, you gain 1 stack of bless marks. You can have a maximum of 10 stacks. You gain magic attack based on the number of stacks you have. You can kind of see the buffs here. When you have a stack of 10... Oh, I'm stuck. Okay. When you have a stack of 10, you gain 1 attack speed. So you always want to have max bless marks, and then if you have 10 bless marks when you use this skill, you gain 10 seconds of invincibility. If you have 9 bless marks, you gain 9 seconds of invincibility, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty good for dodging stuff. If you go too long without charging a bless mark, you lose all of your stacks. So that's pretty much everything as far as Illium goes. So now we're going to move on to what I think about Illium. And I'm going to break this into a couple of different categories. First, I'm just going to go over my thoughts on Illium mobbing and my thoughts on bossing. And then after that, I'm going to go over the reasons why I've decided to quit Illium. Because there's a few specific things that sort of just put me off from the class. And I'll go into more detail about that stuff. I also did a DPS test before I moved my gear back to my Evan. So we can look at that a little bit. I don't have well, I do have the video, but it's kind of hard to splice it in, so I'm just going to show the test itself. If there's, if people really want to see it, I can upload the video itself, but there's not really anything going on other than the test. So for now, start off with mobbing. Illium's mobbing, pretty good. Especially if you can get a map where it's like conducive to having the crystal in the middle and then the reaction skills can like take out the whole map. So like Cavern Lower Path, which is where I did most of my training at 250, if you just kept the crystal in like the middle of the map, every time a reaction skill happened, it would just kill the map, basically. And then Javelin itself is a pretty good mobbing skill. It bounces around between mobs, sort of like Reflection, sort of not. Still not entirely clear on how the bouncing works, but it usually goes to the crystal first, and then it bounces off the crystal to the nearest mob, and then so on and so forth until it reaches the max number of mobs that it can hit, which is 5. So overall, I think Illium's mobbing is pretty good. It's better for long grinding sessions than it is for like, clearing out maps like quickly, if that makes sense. Like if you can get set up and going, then you can just clear the map very consistently. But if you're doing something like, let's say, hard Muto PQ, right? It's a little bit more finicky because you're not exactly clearing the map. You're like moving around to different platforms and like killing mobs individually. So it's better suited for grinding than it is for stuff like that. But I think overall it's still very good. As far as bossing goes, I think that in most bosses, it's actually not very hard to boss efficiently on Illium. But for the bosses that really matter at endgame, like Hard Lucid and Hard Lotus, I think it's a bit too much to deal with to be efficient. And then on top of that, the DPS is not quite what I expected it to be based on the description of a few skills before the release, and I'll go over that more later because that is one of the reasons that I decided to switch off. But the combination of the difficulty of bossing in a situation like Lucid or Hard Lotus, and then the fact that the DPS is not actually that high relative to like Evan, for example, I think makes it not exactly a great choice for bossing. I mean, obviously I'm not, perfect at controlling Illium, and I only did one run of Lucid. Well, technically 2 runs of Lucid, but the first one we didn't actually finish because a couple people DC'd. So I don't have like a ton of experience here. I'm not the end-all, be-all, is Illium a good class? That's not for me to say, right? That's for you to decide after you play the class. But I personally do not think it's worth it for me to main Illium. So I guess that's a good segue into the reasons why I think that. There are 4 reasons. Yeah, 4. So first reason, moving the orb in situations like Lucid and other stuff can be kind of annoying. One of the biggest reasons for that right now is that when there's a reaction skill happening, so like if I use Javelin right now, and while this is happening, you can't move the orb until it's over. Now, this gets patched later, or at least it did in KMS. That patch hasn't gotten to us yet. I think after that patch happens, it'll be a lot smoother, but I also think that even without that caveat, it's still kind of difficult to correctly position the orb all the time, because you only have 2 options when you're moving the orb around. You can either move it a set distance in front of you, or you can move it on top of you. But if like Lucid is up here, right, and the platform is right here, where do I put it? Over here? Well, then Lucid flies over here, and then I have to move it over here, and then it's just, it's constantly trying to make sure that I'm being optimal, which is sort of similar to what happens on Evan, but it's like an extra step, basically. And I think even once it becomes more fluid, after they remove the delay from having the reaction skills going, I think even after that it'll still be kind of annoying. Again, I don't think it'll be an issue in pretty much any boss besides Lucid or Hard Lotus. And Hard Lotus, I'm only assuming that it'll be an issue because, you constantly have to dodge the the debris and everything. So I think for like Damien, totally fine. I think for, I don't know, like CRA, totally fine. I think for Chaos Papulatus, is that a boss people do now? Totally fine. But for the hard bosses, I don't think it's good, which is mostly why I'm deciding to switch. But also, second thing, we have curse marks not exactly working the way I expected them to. And I don't know if this is intentional or if this is bugged, but the way that I read this skill, if we go back to curse marks here, Illium's attacks against Umbral branded enemies inflict an additional hit, dealing 40% damage. The bonus hit's damage is multiplied by up to 5 times based on the number of stacks. Okay, actually, now that I read this in the GMS version, this makes a bit more sense. Still not a whole lot of sense though. No, I guess that makes more sense. But still not a whole lot of sense. So I'll go into detail here, and this is where we're going to cover the DPS test. So let me switch over to this. So here is the first DPS test I did. I did this test for about 3 minutes, as you can see in the top left there. Average damage was about 35 bill, well, just under 36 bill per second, which, you know, given the fact that I didn't have finished weapons and a badge, I think that's not terrible. So you can see here, this is ordered by damage ratio. So Javelin did 45.18% of my damage. I used it 1,066 times. It did 2,406 lines of damage. Now that includes the split-offs that happen when you hit an enemy with Javelin. They're counted in this. So that's not entirely, you know, the Javelin itself. That's also the tiny little things that break off of it after you attack an enemy, which is why the gap between min and max damage is so big. But we'll cover more of that later. Then we have Reaction Destruction, you know, pretty straightforward. Deus, pretty straightforward. Crystal Ignition, the 5th job skills, pretty straightforward. So we're going to skip ahead here to curse marks. As you can see here, curse marks in this 3-minute DPS test only triggered 442 times, which, if I'm using, you know, 1,066 javelins, I would expect curse marks to trigger at least 1,066 times, at least the way I interpreted the skill. Even if only Javelin was proccing the curse mark attacks, it's not even proccing on Javelin itself. Or if it is, it's proccing infrequently, which doesn't sound quite like the skill description to me personally, but maybe I'm, you know, bad at reading whatever. The second thing I wanted to cover with curse marks, in KMS, the translation for the skill was that it did 200% damage of the skill that triggered it. So like if I triggered it with Javelin, for example, and let's say Javelin did, you know, 300% damage, that's not actually the damage, but just for the sake of the example. So if Javelin does 300% damage, and then the curse mark is supposed to do 200% of that, then it should be doing a 600% damage final attack. Clearly that is not happening because its max damage was 836 mil, while the max damage of Javelin was 1.7 bill. So it's not even doing half of Javelin's damage. Now, the reading of the GMS description makes it sound more like it's just 200% damage, but that still seems kind of low for 200% damage. Because like Machina, for example, the one right next to it, Machina's damage percent is 350. And it did consistently about 1.4 bill at 350. Well, maybe that does make sense. Let's bust out a calculator real quick. You know, if I'm stupid, then I'm stupid. That's fine. Let's just do it. So on average, it's doing 1.4 bill at 350. So 200 over 350 times 1.4 bill. Now, okay, so that would be about 200% damage. Okay, so sure. The percent damage, maybe the translation was just wrong, and that was, you know, that's fine. I will accept that I was wrong about that. But the number of procs still seems significantly worse than I would expect, given the fact that it sounded like it procced on every attack. Because clearly it's not. So I'm not sure how that's actually supposed to work. I don't know if that's maybe a bug right now that it's not proccing as much as it should. I don't know if that'll eventually be fixed, or maybe this is intended and I just don't understand how it works. It's totally possible I don't. But I expected curse marks to be a lot stronger than they actually ended up being. And the fact that they're very difficult to maintain in most situations makes it sort of meaningless in my mind as a skill. I mean, obviously it's damage, obviously it's nice to have, but as you can see here, it's only doing less than 5% of my total DPS, which is not very significant. It's about the same as like one of the summons. So I don't know. It was very underwhelming for me compared to what I expected. And even if I was wrong, which I probably was wrong about the damage of the curse marks, I still think the proc rate is a lot worse than it should be. So that's my thoughts on curse marks. You can see over here we have the other skills did the least. Radiant Orb doesn't have an enhancement node, so it like will always do very bad damage. You just can't make an enhancement node for that skill, so it will always be the lowest probably. So that was the first DPS test I did. Here's the second one I did. This is a bit shorter, so the average damage is higher because my burst has a longer cooldown. So here you can see Javelin did about 40% of my damage. Templar Knight did a much higher percent of my damage, as did Crystal Ignition. Destruction and Deus are about where they were originally. Hang on, let's move this down a little bit. So we've got Umblebrand's curse marks at slightly higher than they used to be, but still fairly low. Longinus Spear and the rest, etc., etc. So basically, to summarize, my thoughts on curse marks: I think they don't proc enough based on the skill description. The damage, I will accept that I was most likely reading it incorrectly, or the translation was incorrect or something. I will accept the blame for that one, but the proc rate still seems very bad, because even here, if you look, like, I used Radiant Javelin 416 times. Curse Mark happened 192 times, which is not even half of the times that I used Javelin. So, it seems very not great. So back to Maple. That was point 2. I kind of went on for a while about that. Point 3, stance on Illium is fake. And I don't know how else to describe it, because I've honestly never seen anything like it. But if we go down here to Bless Marks, right? So, this doesn't say it. This is the original skill state. Marks foes with a shadowy brand that renders... No, this is Umbral. Sorry. Where's Bless? Wait, what? Am I, like, out of my mind? Lucent Brand 2. Where's Lucent Brand 1, sir? Okay, well, maybe the skill effect doesn't actually say it. But, the way this skill works, Lucent Brand, wherever it may be, doesn't say it here. Wow, really? They just didn't add it to the skill description. That's very strange. Basically, when you have Bless Marks, you have stance, but it's not real stance. It works against regular mobs. So if I go... I'm just going to give this... So you don't think I'm entirely crazy. I'm going to explain what I mean here. I'm gonna buff up a little bit. Go out to this map. So let's get a bless mark stack going. Alright, let's use some bless marks. Let's dodge this thing because it can probably kill me right now because I don't have gear. Okay, we have 10 bless marks, right? Now hit me. Hit me. You can see this thing happening around me. That reduces the damage that I take from these attacks and also prevents me from being knocked back. You can see that I don't have any stance here. I don't have any stance here. There's no stance. But when you have bless marks, you can't get knocked back by normal attacks. What this doesn't prevent you from getting knocked back by is literally anything that is not a mob walking into you. So like in Lucid, for example, the butterflies constantly shoot little like bullets at you. And they don't do very much damage, but if you don't have stance, they knock you back. And Illium's stance does not work on those. So you constantly get knocked around in that fight unless you have the Mihail Link skill. Now, this can obviously be solved with the Mihail Link skill. It's very difficult to get 100% uptime with the Mihail Link skill on a class that doesn't have any passive buff duration, and I don't really want to sacrifice Legion or an inner ability line for it. So, kind of really bothered me that stance is like fake on this class. I mean, it doesn't show in the skill description. In the translations from GMS, it does mention that you won't be knocked back as long as you have bless marks, and that's how it works against normal mobs. But against anything that is not like touch damage, you get knocked back still, which I think is very dumb. So that's point 3. Maybe it's a shallow point for me, but you know, whatever. I stand by it. I think it's dumb. Fourth point, final point. Skill canceling is not consistent. So I went over earlier that you can animation cancel Javelin and Orb to do it very fast, right? So the problem with this, in my opinion, is that compared to something like Nightwalker's jump attacking, where you have a very consistent stream of stars going as you're doing it, Illium's skill canceling is not consistent in the least. And what I mean by that is, let's go ahead and do some attacking here, alright? So I'm spamming, I'm spamming, I'm spamming, I'm spamming, I'm spamming, I'm spamming. See how sometimes, rather than doing Orb and then Javelin, I'm doing like 4 Javelins in a row, or I'm doing like 4 Orbs in a row? This happens even if you use the Sticky Keys version, and it bothers me. I don't know how else to describe why it bothers me. I would much rather it be a very consistent, like, Orb Javelin, Orb Javelin, Orb Javelin, Orb Javelin, etc. But for some reason, sometimes you just do a lot of Orbs, sometimes you just do a lot of Javelins. It happens even with Sticky Keys. I've tried it so many different ways, and no matter how I do it, there will always be instances where you just do like a bunch of one attack and like none of the other. And that really bothers me. And it might not even matter for DPS that much, I don't know. I'm assuming it does, but it goes both ways because obviously you want to be doing more Javelins than you want to be doing Orbs. So like for all the times you do 5 Orbs in a row, you probably also do 5 Javelins in a row and it balances out. But it just really annoys me that sometimes you get like a chain of 5 Orbs and you actually just stop doing damage because Orb does nothing. So that's point 4. And all of those 4 points combined, the difficulty of moving the Orb around, the curse marks being significantly worse than expected, the stance being fake, and skill canceling being not consistent are the main reasons that I want to not play this class anymore, basically. At least for bossing. I still think the mobbing is fun. I still think it is good at mobbing, and I still think that for bosses other than Lucid and Hard Lotus, this class is probably pretty good, especially because it has a lot of iframes. It's just for the very upper tier of bosses, it's not gonna cut it, I think. And that's unfortunate, but you know, whatever. A lot of people have asked me, do I regret racing the class to 250? No, I don't regret doing the race. I had a lot of fun with the race. I'm glad that I won the race. If I lost the race and then quit the class, that would be a little bit more depressing. But as it is, I do not regret racing. The only things I regret are wearing these, so they are now untradeable forever, and then spending a lot of my honor on this, because this is like meaningless now, because I'm never going to play this. So those are the only things I regret. Making the class, training at 250, don't regret it at all. It was fun. I'm glad I did it. I'm never going to do it again, but I'm glad I did it at least once, so that I can just say, you know, the fastest time I ever got at 250 was blank. So that pretty much sums up my thoughts on Illium. Don't think there's much else to say. Pretty good class overall, I guess. And you know, maybe once you get good at controlling the crystal, and once they fix the moving it during the reaction skill thing, it'll be better. I mean, it most definitely will be better. But I still think even after that, I wouldn't enjoy playing the class, and so that is why I am changing back for now. Like I said, there are plans for stuff in the future. I'll be making an update video probably in the next 2 days, maybe tomorrow even, over what my plans are moving forward. But for now, that is my thoughts on Illium. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you feel the same way, or if you actually really like Illium. If you do, great. I'm happy for you. But for me, it just, you know, wasn't feeling it. So, unfortunate, but it happens. Anyways, I hope this was insightful for people. If you were looking for a sort of brief, you know, description of the class, there you go. You have it. If you're still iffy, I would try it yourself before, you know, just listening to me and being like, I don't want to play that. It's always worth trying a class for yourself just to see if you enjoy it, rather than listening to other people's opinions. Because, you know, a lot of people don't like Evan, for example, but I like Evan. Evan's pretty cool. And so, there you go. Always try it for yourself, but it's nice to have other people's opinions out there, so there you go. You got my opinion, and I'm still rambling, so that's going to be the end of the video. Thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you in the next few days with a more official update video on my plans moving forward. And, yep, see you guys later.